morning. We're going to start in a few minutes, but just a reminder, the QR code that's up on the screen is specifically for nursing students to scan in, and then there'll be one at the end of every presentation to scan out. Laura Yoder is at the back, and she is here. She has a paper QR code, which is what you would scan to earn EMU Engage points at the end of the full session, which is the first two presentations. So if you're nursing, please make sure you scan in. If you want Engage, please make sure you see Laura.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 2026 ACE Festival Nursing Colloquium presentations. There will be 5 presentations today, and I'm just going to delve in and introduce our first group. So we have Madison Bowyer, Odessa Elezi, and Elijah Spiker, and they will be presenting today on mindful transitions, supporting mental health in long-term care. So, welcome.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had 2 jobs and I only did 1. Please don't eat the Skittles yet. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Madison.
I'm Elijah.
And I'm Odessa.
We're so glad to see you all here today. We're going to spend the next 40 minutes exploring a topic that is both deeply human and central to nursing care, supporting older adults during one of the most challenging transitions in life, the move from independent living into a long-term care facility. To start us off, we want to do a visualization activity with everyone. All of you have a bag of Skittles. If you don't have a bag of Skittles, please find one around you or you can share. Now, pour them into your hand. Give you all a second to do so. Now that you all have them in your hand, imagine your home and all the things that are meaningful to you. These are all represented by the Skittles. Think about your space. Your home that's, say, about 2,000 square feet in size, your kitchen, your bedroom, your routine. Everything you own is represented by these Skittles. Everything you've worked so hard for and built most of your life on is represented in your hand. Now imagine most of that being taken away from you. Someone tells you that you have to downsize enough to fit into a 220 square foot bedroom, which means you can only take 2 of those Skittles because that's all that will fit. You have to leave or sell the rest of your Skittles to go live in a facility with people you have never met, and there was nothing you could do about it. How would you feel? This is a reality that a lot of residents today have faced. Now, this isn't just a simple change of address. For residents, it's a profound life shift that affects emotional, social, and cognitive well-being. Again, imagine leaving your home, your familiar routines, the people and activities that have shaped your life, and stepping into a completely new environment where everything feels unfamiliar. That's the experience we're trying to understand. As nurses, it's our responsibility to support residents through this journey with compassion, skill, and evidence-based strategies. Now, moving on to our purpose and objectives. Let's begin by framing the purpose of today's discussion. Research consistently demonstrates that relocating to a residential care setting brings significant emotional challenges. According to Taylor and colleagues, older adults often experience grief, anxiety, and sadness when leaving their homes. They report feelings of lost independence, fear of social isolation, and concern about adapting to a completely new environment. Think about that for a moment. Imagine you have lived in your own home for decades. You know every corner, every sound, every light switch. Now imagine leaving all of that behind. That is exactly what residents experience when they move into long-term care. It's a major life disruption, and it's more than a logistical challenge. It's a psychological, social, and emotional one. Here's where nursing comes in. Nurses are uniquely positioned to bridge the gap between a resident's past life and their new reality. We are caregivers performing tasks. In addition, we are guides, advocates, and companions during this transition. We see the anxiety, the hesitation, and the loneliness that residents experience. We also have the opportunity to intervene in ways that are meaningful and effective. Let's move on to our objectives and outcomes. Today, we will examine the psychological and emotional effects of relocation supported by recent research, explore evidence-based nursing interventions that reduce depression, anxiety, and social isolation, discuss the application of theories such as crisis theory and the Sacred Covenant in supporting residents, and consider practical strategies for implementation in real-world residential care settings. By the end of this session, you should be able to identify interventions that improve emotional adjustment, understand the theoretical frameworks behind them, and appreciate the nurse's role in creating a supportive, compassionate, and evidence-informed environment for residents.
Before we dive into interventions, it's important for you all to understand the background of what actually happens when someone moves into a long-term care facility. Research demonstrates that residents often experience a significant increase in depressive symptoms, anxiety, and loneliness immediately after admission into long-term care. A 2024 study by Browers and colleagues found that even relocation within care settings can temporarily increase depressive symptoms. In other words, the research shows that moving from more independent living to nursing care within the same facility can be detrimental to mental health. These findings reinforce the idea that relocation is not just a one-time event, but a process that can significantly impact mental health. A 2018 study found that older adults often experience a reduction in social networks. They leave friends, neighbors, community connections, and even family members behind. Another study emphasized that the loss of familiar routines such as waking up at a certain time, making morning coffee, walking the dog, and attending weekly community events causes stress, confusion, and sometimes even physical decline. A 2020 study found that without structured support, these residents are at an increased risk of depressive symptoms, anxiety, and social withdrawal. The research paints a clear picture that relocation is not just a physical change, it's a psychosocial crisis. Some residents adjust naturally, but many need intentional, structured interventions to prevent emotional and cognitive decline. Think about it. Moving is stressful for everyone. However, for older adults, it's complicated by reduced physical abilities, potential cognitive decline, and a perceived loss of independence. Now that we understand the background, let's look at one of the most important aspects of supporting residents during transitions: social engagement. Taylor and colleagues conducted a study examining older adults who moved into a residential care facility. They found that those who participated in structured social activities reported feeling significantly less lonely and more emotionally resilient. These weren't just passive activities, they were intentional, designed to foster connection and community. Social engagement interventions serve as a bridge between the old life and the new, helping residents to reestablish a sense of belonging. A 2025 study by Lane and colleagues found that even the anticipation of moving into long-term care can increase depressive symptoms, particularly when individuals feel they lack strong social support. This demonstrates the importance of building meaningful relationships early, both before and after relocation. The research shows these relationships can serve as a protective factor against emotional distress. Social engagement is not just beneficial after admission, but is critical throughout the entire transition process. A 2022 study emphasized that peer interactions allow residents to rebuild social networks, which is critical for mental health. The goal here is not just to prevent loneliness. The goal during this transition time is fostering resilience. The 2022 study supports the idea that engagement can actually buffer stress, improve mood, and support cognitive function. That means that when nurses plan activities like discussion groups, collaborative art projects, gardening clubs, or team building exercises, they're not just creating entertainment. Instead, they're actively supporting emotional health. A 2020 study by Raj and colleagues demonstrated that tailoring activities to individual preferences and life history increases engagement. For instance, if a resident enjoyed gardening before transitioning to the long-term care setting, providing an opportunity to care for plants could make them feel connected to their past life while integrating into their new community. Similarly, someone who enjoyed writing or storytelling could thrive in a narrative or poetry group. This personalized approach demonstrates respect for the resident's identity, fosters engagement, and supports emotional well-being. Nurses play a critical role in facilitating these interventions. It's not enough to offer generic group activities. Staff need to observe how residents respond, adjust participation as needed, and encourage those who may be hesitant to join. Even something as simple as inviting a resident by name, acknowledging their feelings, and helping them to feel comfortable in a new setting can make a significant difference. This approach reflects the importance of individualized, compassionate nursing care that supports dignity and emotional adjustment. Social engagement is also connected to measurable health outcomes. Studies show that residents who participate in meaningful social activities demonstrate reduced depressive symptoms, improved mood, and better cognitive functioning over time. So, as nurses, when we think about social engagement, we need to see it as both a strategy and a plan of action. It's about creating an environment where residents can feel seen, heard, and valued, while simultaneously addressing the psychological stress of relocation. By combining research, theory, and relational practice, nurses can create a powerful, evidence-based approach to improving emotional outcomes during this vulnerable time.
Moving beyond pure social engagement, let's consider the role of staff support. A 2022 study found that staff-resident relationships are a major factor in emotional adjustment during the transition to long-term care. Positive interactions with staff reduced anxiety, built trust, and increased willingness to engage in activities. In other words, the presence of a compassionate, attentive nurse or caregiver can be just as crucial as peer engagement in helping residents adjust. Staff support involves much more than completing tasks. Therapeutic communication is key. This means actively listening, validating feelings, acknowledging fears, and providing reassurance. Small gestures like a smile, a greeting, or a gentle check-in can communicate to residents that they are valued and not invisible to their new environment. Staff support plays a crucial role in helping residents adjust by providing emotional reassurance, building trust, and fostering a sense of safety. These interactions help residents feel seen and supported, which encourages participation and reduces anxiety during the transition. Practical interventions based on this research include pre- and post-activity check-ins, one-on-one conversations, personalized encouragement, and validation for resident feelings. These interventions may seem small, but the impact is profound. Residents who feel supported by staff are more likely to participate in social and cognitive activities, reducing isolation, anxiety, and depressive symptoms. In addition, a 2020 study by Kozlow and Parmalee found that relocation stress is a strong predictor of depression among first-year residents, regardless of cognitive status. This means that even residents without cognitive impairment are at significant risk for emotional distress, further emphasizing the importance of early staff intervention, emotional support, and therapeutic communication during the transition period. Evidence also demonstrates measurable outcomes. Residents with strong staff support report higher satisfaction with residential life, improved mood, and increased participation in activities. Nurses are not simply providing tasks. They are shaping the emotional climate, fostering trust, and encouraging adaptation to a new and often overwhelming environment. In practice, this requires awareness, intentionality, and consistency. Staff need to recognize subtle signs of anxiety, withdrawal, or distress, and respond with empathy and individualized support. This relational aspect of care is often the difference between a resident who struggles to adjust and one who thrives, and exemplifies the integration of research, theory, and professional nursing values. Now that we have covered social engagement and staff support, let's dive into another key area: cognitive and activity-based interventions. These are structured programs designed to stimulate residents' minds, engage their senses, and foster emotional well-being. A 2020 study conducted research demonstrating that memory exercises, music therapy, art projects, and other activity-based interventions significantly reduce depressive symptoms while promoting participation and engagement among older adults transitioning into long-term care. Why is this so important? When a resident moves into a new environment, they often experience a sense of loss, not just socially, but cognitively and emotionally. Familiar routines are gone, and their autonomy may be restricted. Without meaningful engagement, residents can become passive, withdrawn, or even depressed. Cognitive and activity-based interventions provide purposeful engagement, helping residents regain a sense of agency and competence. Take memory games, for example. These activities are not just for entertainment. They stimulate cognitive pathways, reinforce personal identity, and provide opportunities for social interaction. Imagine a resident who was a teacher. Engaging them in a storytelling, reading groups, or helping lead simple discussions can reinforce identity and keep them mentally active. Music and art therapy offer another layer of emotional support. Music has the power to evoke memories, reduce stress, and improve mood. Art allows self-expression, which is particularly meaningful for residents who may feel a loss of control over other areas of life. These interventions provide residents with meaningful ways to engage, express themselves, and reconnect with their identities, which supports emotional adjustment and overall well-being. In practical terms, nurses can implement cognitive and activity-based interventions by observing residents' interests, assessing abilities, and offering a variety of options. For instance, a resident who enjoyed writing might participate in a storytelling or journaling group. Another resident who played a musical instrument might join a sing-along or music appreciation session. Activities should be rotated regularly to prevent boredom and maintain engagement, and staff should provide encouragement and support to help residents participate at their own pace. Research shows tangible outcomes for these interventions. Residents who engage in structured cognitive activities experience reduced depressive symptoms, improved mood, increased social interaction, and enhanced quality of life. These interventions reinforce the idea that emotional and cognitive well-being are interconnected, and that nurses play a crucial role in facilitating experiences that support both. A 2017 study also found that residents who maintained higher level of everyday competence and engagement in activities reported fewer depressive symptoms. This suggests that promoting independence and encouraging participation in meaningful daily tasks, no matter how small, can significantly impact emotional well-being. Activities are not just about stimulation, but about preserving a resident's sense of control and identity. So when we think about cognitive and activity-based interventions, it's more than providing an activity schedule. It's about connecting with residents' identities, supporting emotional adjustment, and offering a structured yet flexible way to engage residents during one of life's most challenging transitions. These interventions, combined with social engagement and staff support, create a comprehensive, evidence-based strategy for promoting well-being in long-term care.
Now we're going to switch over to local context. So let's shift gears and consider the local context. For our population health project, we partnered with Bridgewater Retirement Community, a facility serving over 500 residents across multiple levels of care. Here, we had the opportunity to observe firsthand the challenges faced by residents transitioning from independent living to long-term care. Residents often reported social withdrawal and emotional distress. Many described feeling grief over the loss of independence, anxiety about adjusting to new routines, and worry about making new friends. Staff noticed that without structured support, new residents could quickly become isolated, which amplified feelings of sadness and disconnection. These observations are consistent with research by Baum and colleagues, as well as those by Koslow and Parmalee, which demonstrate that the first few weeks after relocation are often the most emotionally challenging. Residents may feel a loss of control, increased anxiety, and heightened loneliness during this period, making early intervention especially important for settings like Bridgewater. To address these challenges, we implemented bi-weekly group sessions designated to foster social interaction, cognitive stimulation, and emotional support. The sessions included team-building exercises, collaborative projects, and educational components focused on mental health topics such as coping strategies, stress management, and relaxation techniques. A 2018 study found that structured group activities significantly reduced feelings of loneliness, which was reflected in our observations at Bridgewater. Residents who participated in these sessions reported feeling more connected, more confident, and more willing to engage in other activities. A 2022 study similarly demonstrated that promoting social engagement enhances mental health outcomes, reduces anxiety, and supports adaptation to new environments. A 2020 study by Raj and colleagues emphasized that educational interventions about mental health increases residents' awareness, empowers self-management, and decreases depressive symptoms. What made our approach effective was the use of structured support, meaningful engagement, and interdisciplinary collaboration. By addressing emotional, social, and cognitive needs, we were able to support residents in adapting to their new environment. The interdisciplinary approach was also crucial. We collaborated with the activity services leader and residents to tailor interventions to residents' needs. Outcomes from these interventions were measurable. Residents demonstrated increased participation, improved mood, and greater satisfaction with their living environment. Observational data indicated that residents who engaged in structured activities experienced fewer complaints of loneliness, greater social confidence, and more willingness to try new experiences. These improvements were supported by qualitative feedback, including resident reflections and statements, as well as staff observations. By situating our project in the local context of Bridgewater, we were able to see how theory and evidence-based practice intersect in real life. Interventions that honor the experiences of residents, support coping during transitions, and foster community can transform the relocation experience from one of fear and isolation to one of connection and well-being. Now, let's step back and look at the bigger picture. Evidence-based practice means that we take the best available research and combine it with clinical expertise and align it with the residents' preferences and needs. For example, Taylor in 2018 demonstrated that structured social activities reduce loneliness and improve emotional resilience among residents transitioning into long-term care. Pulowski and colleagues in 2022 showed that strong staff support increases trust, promotes engagement, and enhances adjustment. Raj and colleagues highlighted that cognitive stimulation, including music, art, and memory exercises, can significantly reduce depressive symptoms. A 2017 study supports that maintaining functional independence and participation in daily activities reduces depressive symptoms, while Baum and colleagues in 2022 emphasizes that emotional distress is often highest immediately after relocation, reinforcing the need for early, structured interventions. By combining these strategies, we are not guessing. We are applying tested interventions with real outcomes. Nurses assess each resident's unique circumstances, consider their prior life experiences, and tailor interventions accordingly.
Evaluating the effectiveness of interventions is extremely important. Evidence from multiple studies shows that structured interventions can significantly improve emotional outcomes for residents. Research demonstrates that while depressive symptoms often increase immediately after relocation, they decrease over time with proper support. Kozlow and Parmalee found that reducing relocation stress can directly lower depression levels. During our first visit at Bridgewater Retirement, we worked with residents to identify activities that would suit their interests. Qualitative feedback from residents revealed that participants appreciated activities that reflected their personal interests and helped them to feel more connected. Increased participation, improved mood, and greater willingness to engage were key indicators that our interventions were effective. Ongoing evaluation allowed us to recognize the importance of adaptability in our approach. Not all residents responded to interventions in the same way. which highlighted the need for individualized care and flexibility in activity planning. By continuously assessing engagement levels and emotional responses, we were able to make small adjustments that enhance participation and overall satisfaction. This reinforced the idea that effective interventions are not static, but rather evolve based on unique needs and preferences of the population being served. Now, instead of just talking about interventions in theory, let's slow down for a moment and actually apply everything we've discussed to a real-life scenario. I want you to picture a resident named Mrs. Markham. Mrs. Markham is a 78-year-old woman who recently transitioned from independent living into a long-term care facility. Before this move, she lived alone in her home for over 30 years. That home wasn't just a place. It was her routine, her independence, and a huge part of her identity. She loved horseback riding when she was younger, listened to music every single day, and regularly attended community events at her church. She had structure, connection, and a strong sense of familiarity in her daily life. Since her transition, staff have noticed some changes. She spends most of her time alone in her room. She rarely attends group activities. When staff invite her, she often declines. And when she does speak, she has expressed feeling out of place and disconnected from everything around her. So now, instead of me telling you what to do, I want you to think like the nurse in this situation. We're going to walk through a few short questions together. Before we do that, we'd like for you all to use your cell phones and scan the QR code to complete a short Google form with answers. We'd love for you all to think clinically and reflect on what we've talked about. The questions are as follows. What stands out to you as the biggest concern for Mrs. Markham right now? What's one nursing intervention you would prioritize first? How could you personalize care based on her past interests and identity? We'll give you all some time to think about this and respond. It's not working. The link's not working.
It's not working.
Is anyone able to get on the link?
No.
Okay. Well, so we'll go through the questions one by one, and we'll just ask you all to respond. So what's the biggest concern for the resident right now? Depression. Depression? Yeah. Maybe social isolation? Okay. Anybody else? Lack of engagement. What's one nursing intervention you would prioritize first? Establishing a new routine. That's great. Anybody else? What's that? Okay. Engaging with her one-on-one, yeah, an assessment. And how could you personalize care based on her past interests and identity? What are some ways that the care could be personalized? Bring a horse in.
We could definitely do horse therapy.
All right. What most people recognize pretty quickly is the concern here is social isolation and emotional distress. Our client is withdrawing, she's disconnected, and she's verbalizing that she feels out of place. Taylor and colleagues found that when residents lose their familiar environment, routines, and social networks, they're at a high risk for depression, anxiety, and withdrawal. Now moving to the second question. What would you prioritize first as the nurse? The priority here is intentional, supportive, and personalized engagement. Instead of forcing the resident into a large group or overwhelming her with activities, it's important to start small. We need to meet her where she is, build rapport, and gently introduce interaction opportunities. Now, the third question asks us how we can individualize the resident's care. This is the part that seems to get missed commonly in the long-term care setting. This is where we need to stop seeing Mrs. Markham as a resident and start seeing her as a person with a history. We know she loved horseback riding. She enjoys music. She was active in her community. So, instead of offering generic activities, we can connect her past to her present. Maybe that looks like sitting with her and talking about her experiences with horseback riding, introducing music sessions with songs she enjoys, encouraging participation in smaller, more comfortable group settings, or even something as simple as storytelling and reminiscing. These interactions have the potential to show the resident that we care about her story. They'll make the resident feel heard. Further, the interactions help the resident engage in activities that are meaningful to her. These are identity-based interventions that help her feel like herself again in a place that currently feels unfamiliar. And finally, how do we know if what we're doing is actually working? This is where evaluation becomes really important. Some aspects of our assessment could be asking the following questions. Is she spending less time isolated in her room? Is her mood improving, even slightly? Is she more willing to talk or engage with staff or peers? Is she expressing less distress or more comfort? And, just as important, we need to listen to her qualitative feedback. If she says she feels more comfortable, more connected, or even just a little better, that tells us we're moving in the right direction.
Our project is supported by multiple theoretical frameworks. We will begin with the crisis theory as described by Aguilera. Crisis theory explains how individuals respond to stressful events that overwhelm their usual coping mechanisms. A crisis occurs when a person is unable to use their typical problem-solving strategies to manage a situation, resulting in a temporary state of psychological imbalance. According to Aguilera, there are 3 key factors that influence how an individual experiences and resolves a crisis. The first is the individual's perception of the event, meaning how they interpret or assign meaning to the situation. The second is the availability of situational support, such as family, friends, or external resources. The third is the person's coping mechanism, or their ability to manage stress and adapt to change. These 3 components work together to determine whether a crisis is resolved successfully or leads to further psychological distress. Crisis theory also includes 4 stages that individuals typically move throughout during a crisis. The first stage is the initial rise in tension, where a person's usual coping mechanisms are still effective, but stress is increasing. The second stage occurs when these usual coping strategies fail, leading to increased anxiety and discomfort. The third stage involves the individual attempting to use new problem-solving strategies or external resources to manage the crisis. Finally, the fourth stage occurs if the crisis remains unresolved, resulting in severe anxiety, disorganization, or emotional breakdown. Crisis theory emphasizes that a crisis is time-limited and can be resolved, but the outcome depends heavily on the balance between stressors and available support. The next framework we will introduce is systems theory. Systems theory is based on the idea that individuals are part of a larger, interconnected system. A system is made up of multiple components that interact with one another. And changes in one part of the system can influence the functioning of the whole. Rather than viewing a person in isolation, systems theory emphasizes that behavior and experiences are shaped by relationships, environment, and external influences. Each system is composed of smaller subsystems, and at the same time, it exists within larger systems. Because of this, individuals are constantly interacting with multiple levels of influence. A key concept within systems theory is that the system seeks balance or equilibrium. When a disruption occurs, the system must adapt in order to restore stability. This framework provides a way to understand how multiple factors interact and influence an individual's overall functioning.
The final framework we will introduce is the concept of the sacred covenant, which is foundational to the nursing program here at Eastern Mennonite University. The sacred covenant describes the nurse-patient relationship as a moral and relational commitment. It emphasizes that nursing is not only a scientific and technical practice, but also one that is grounded in human connection, respect, and ethical responsibility. At the core of the sacred covenant is the belief that every individual has inherent worth and dignity. This framework calls for care that recognizes the whole person, including physical, emotional, social, and spiritual dimensions. It also emphasizes key values such as presence, compassion, trust, and mutual respect within the nurse-patient relationship. The elements of the sacred covenant include agape love, intentional presence, mutuality, respect for dignity, and faithfulness to the relationship. One element that is especially important to highlight is agape love. Agape love is a selfless, unconditional form of caring that is not based on personal gain, but instead focuses on truly wanting the best for another person. In the context of Bridgewater Retirement Community, this can be seen in the ways nurses and staff care for residents even during difficult moments, such as when a resident is experiencing confusion, frustration, or even emotional distress. Showing patience, kindness, and continued compassion in these situations reflects agape love and helps residents feel safe, respected, and valued despite the challenges they may be facing. The Sacred Covenant reinforces the idea that nursing involves entering into a relationship with another person in a way that is intentional, respectful, and grounded in ethical care. This framework serves as a foundation for understanding the deeper meaning and responsibility of nursing practice. Moving on, so how can the theoretical frameworks and the research be applied to nursing practice? These things establish that interventions must be intentional, structured, and evidence-based. Social engagement, staff support, and cognitive activities improve emotional well-being, promote adjustment, and enhance quality of life. The nurse's role is to be a change agent and advocate. We identify unmet needs, develop creative solutions, collaborate with interdisciplinary teams, and evaluate the outcomes of our interventions. For example, partnering with the activity service leaders, like we did, and other staff ensures that interventions are practical and effective. It is equally important to reinforce the ethical dimension of care. The Sacred Covenant reminds us that nursing is a moral practice grounded in presence, trust, and respect for residents' dignity. Engaging residents relationally, honoring their preferences, and being emotionally present are as critical as clinical skills. Incorporating crisis theory into everyday nursing practice ensures that we recognize the disruption caused by relocation and provide structured support to promote healthy coping and adaptation. Nurses play a key role in helping residents regain equilibrium, develop coping strategies, and find a new sense of purpose in a changed environment. Systems theory reminds us to evaluate care in the context of multiple influencing factors. Adjustment is affected by social relationships, staff interactions, organizational culture, and the physical environment. Effective nursing interventions consider all these components, creating a network of support that promotes long-term well-being.
Now, we understand that many of you aren't interested in working in the long-term care setting. I want us to take a step back and look at the bigger picture. At first, everything we've talked about today, like relocation stress, loss of independence, and emotional adjustment, might seem like they only apply to long-term care. But honestly, the more we work through this project, the more we realize that this applies to every area of nursing, not just geriatrics. As future nurses, no matter where we end up working, whether that's the emergency department, ICU, pediatrics, labor and delivery, or even community health, we're all going to take care of patients who are going through some kind of major life change or loss. When you really think about it, being admitted to the hospital is a huge transition for patients too. They're taken out of their normal environment. They lose control over their routine. They're surrounded by people they don't know, and they're often scared or unsure about what's going to happen next. That's very similar to what residents experience when they move into long-term care. For example, a post-op patient may suddenly need help with things they used to do independently. A patient receiving a new diagnosis may feel overwhelmed or anxious. A mom in labor may feel vulnerable and out of control in the moment. Patients in the ICU could feel confused, isolated, and maybe even completely dependent on others. So even though the settings look different, the emotions behind the experience are very similar. And I think that's what really stood out to us during this project. It reminded us that, as nurses, we're not just taking care of someone's physical health. We're also taking care of their emotional experience. This is why things like therapeutic communication, being present, actively listening, and individualizing care are so important in every setting. Because at the end of the day, patients are dealing with more than a diagnosis or a procedure. They're dealing with a loss of control, changes in their identity, and a lot of uncertainty. As nurses, we have a huge role in how they experience that moment. We can either make it feel overwhelming and isolating, or we can help make it feel supported, understood, and maybe even a little less scary. So, even if you never work in long-term care, The ideas we talked about today still matter because you will care for patients going through transitions, and how you respond to that reality makes a difference.
Supporting older adults during transition into long-term care requires a comprehensive, thoughtful, and research-informed approach. Residents like Mrs. Markham face situational crisis, including the loss of independence, disruption of routines, and social isolation. By integrating crisis theory, systems theory, and the sacred covenant, nurses can provide care that is relational, ethical, and effective. Structured social engagement, consistent staff support, and cognitive or activity-based interventions work together to enhance emotional, social, and cognitive well-being. Evidence-based practice ensures that our interventions are grounded in research, tailored to residents' needs, and continuously evaluated for effectiveness. Outcomes from the research demonstrate measurable improvements in mood, engagement, and overall satisfaction with life in long-term care. As nurses, we have the power to transform what could be an overwhelming, isolating experience into one of connection, engagement, and personal growth. We advocate, we listen, we support, and we honor the lives and experiences of those in our care. Remember, the sacred covenant is more than an idea. It is a guiding framework that informs every interaction, decision, and intervention. By applying these principles thoughtfully, we promote not only adjustment, but also meaning, purpose, and dignity for every resident. Thank you for your attention and engagement today. I hope this presentation inspires reflection on how you, as future nurses, can support residents through some of life's most challenging transitions, turning moments of crisis into opportunities for growth, connection, and resilience. This is our reference page, and we can take whatever questions you guys have at this point.
I have a microphone so folks online can hear us if you have questions. So think for a second. I'll start. I wondered, I know that Bridgewater Retirement Community is known, right, as a pretty high quality long-term care facility. Was there anything from your research that you learned and like new ideas maybe that they weren't already doing, or not, because I know that they are, pretty on it. But I was just curious if there were new things or new strategies that emerged from the literature that you either integrated into your work or gave them as suggestions for ways that they could improve their care.
So one thing we gave as a suggestion is incorporating more cognitively stimulating activities. One of our studies showed that decreases depressive symptoms, at least in the group they studied. So that was something we definitely mentioned to them to incorporate more of.
Thanks. Other questions? You can always count on the level 3s to ask questions.
I was just going to ask what led you all to work with or to pick this topic.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Jazzy. So there's a couple of different reasons why we decided to go and continue on with this topic. One of the main reasons is that we all believe that mental health is important, and we have learned throughout the semesters how it shows up in different settings, and we just personally wanted to explore more the transition phase. Another reason is that we all started clinicals in level 1 at a retirement home, and it's just very interesting to see from level 1 until now, 2 years later in level 3, how much we have grown and how more confident we are and comfortable into taking care of the residents. So it was also just a really nice reflection on our end to be able to come up with interventions and come up with activities that we can help the residents. I would say those are the main 2 reasons.
This might be a bit of a stretch, but I feel like we keep hearing that like in the next coming decades, the baby boomers are going to get really old and we're going to need a lot more staff. Did anything in your research talk about, or like how realistic would any of your interventions require more staffing, or did you come across any information about that issue?
Yeah, that's a great question. We definitely recognize that it's not always realistic to make activities that are individualized to 30, 40 residents. So I think the main thing is just having a conversation with activity staff. That's kind of something that could be done just to gauge the interests of the population you're working with and to try to individualize the care a bit more. So, we can't always perfect the interventions that we do as nurses because we don't have the time, right? So just having that conversation is a realistic step that the nurses could take.
We can't have horses in every long-term care facility. Any other questions? Yes.
I just affirm the work that you've done. We just put my mom in from a 2-bedroom apartment to a 1-room, and she needed that one-to-one. And I think too often we get busy in our task-oriented brains and forget that one-to-one connection is so important. So I really appreciated your work in this, and hopefully it'll help you guys as you go into these places, whether it's nursing home or into your fast-paced whatever you're moving into, to remember that one-to-one connection is important and take time.
Absolutely. Thank you, Judy.
Thank you, Judy.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
All right. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
So, is the mic on? Okay. We're going to actually bump our schedule by 5 minutes so we can have a little transition here. So the next presentation is going to start at 9:20. For nursing students, please scan out of this, and in a few minutes, the next one will come in to scan in. So 5 minutes, make sure you're back in your seats while we get set up for the next group. Thank you.
Have to come to 3 of them. So I'm
Yeah,
like,
but
where
there's
are
still
you guys?
3 at the end.
There's only.
Yeah, there's 3 at the end.
Oh shit, you're right.
So
there's
maybe
5.
they go to all 3.
Okay.
I mean, like,
I'll take it.
If you can just tell me, like, when you get to that slide and when you want me to start it,
she'll, yeah.
I'll watch the video.
Yep, I do say that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I can give you a cue
Okay.
sentence if you want, though.
Does it work?
Okay, he's gone.
Good morning.
See, I don't know how close to stand. Hello?
I don't think. Oh.
I don't know. I project pretty well, so I think I'll.
Yeah, you're kind of loud, so.
Okay. All right.
No, I'm kidding. I am too. I think I'm gonna stand back because I'm a very.
All right, please come to the chairs and find a seat for our next colloquium presentation. And I will just repeat again so nobody misses this opportunity. If you are a nursing student, please scan the QR code prior to and after each presentation for credit. All right? And if you want an engaged credit, you need to go see Laura Yoder in the back afterward. So, it is my pleasure to introduce our next presentation and our next presenters. So we have Emily Gwynn, Christina Suslayev, and Reina Landa, and they will be sharing with us today about the effects of social media on the mental health of children and adolescents. So welcome.
Good morning, guys. Today we will be presenting on the relationship between social media use and mental health comes in youth. Mental health is a sensitive and a triggering subject, so if you guys need to step out, please do what you guys need to do. Yeah, so before we begin, can you go to the next slide? Thank you. Before we begin, we would like to play a quick video. As you watch, consider how early exposure to social media may influence emotional development and then mental health in children. Thank you guys for watching with us. What we just saw is not an isolated scenario. For many children, social media exposure begins earlier than we can often recognize, and it can have real emotional and psychological effects. This is especially important because early exposure often begins during critical periods of brain and emotional development, when children are still learning how to regulate their emotions, understand social cues, and process interpersonal experiences. Experiences in digital space can feel just as real and impactful as those in person, particularly for younger children who may not yet have had the emotional or cognitive skills to fully interpret what they're seeing or experiencing online. This PSA that we just watched is called The Gift, It was created by the Wait Until 8th movement, which encourages children to wait until at least 8th grade to actually have a smartphone due to concerns about anxiety, depression, and poor mental health outcomes. A dad actually made it, which I thought was really cool because he wanted to spread the word. As healthcare professionals, we are increasingly seeing the effects of these early exposures reflected in our practice in real time. This raises such an important question. What role does social media play in shaping mental health outcomes in children and in adolescents? Today, social media is so deeply embedded into the daily lives of youth, shaping how they communicate, how they interact, and view themselves and others. Before we get into it, by a show of hands, how many of you guys use social media? I know, I'm guilty. Right, just like us, research shows that nearly all US teens use social media. Think platforms like Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, ones I'm sure we all just thought about, play a central role in their daily life. At the same time, mental health concerns are rising. Suicide is now the second leading cause of death in children ages 10 to 14. And alongside with that, we're also seeing increased rates of anxiety and depression. From a nursing perspective, this reflects systems theory, which recognizes that adolescent health is shaped by multiple interconnected influences, like family, peers, school, and the digital environment itself. Rather than viewing social media as an isolated factor, systems theory helps us understand that it's a part of a larger network of influences that all interact to shape mental health outcomes. As nurses, we are often in a position to recognize early emotional and behavioral changes, and we can intervene quickly. That means that we're not only assessing the individual, but also considering the broader systems that affect them. So family support, how are their peer dynamics, what are their online environments look like? In practice, this requires us to expand on how we approach assessment. Instead of focusing on just symptoms like we would for a physical illness, we begin to explore how different aspects of an adolescent's environment may be contributing to what we are seeing clinically. That includes their digital interactions, their relationships, and their support systems as a whole. This helps ensure that we are capturing a more complete and holistic picture of their mental health. This approach is so important because adolescents may not always be able to recognize or communicate the role that social media can play in their emotional well-being. By using a broader assessment lens, nurses are better to able to identify subtle risk factors and intervene earlier in a more targeted and a more effective way. After seeing why this topic matters, we will now review our objectives for this presentation. First, we want to examine the relationship between social media use and then adolescents' mental health. Then we want to be able to identify key risk and protective factors. Then we will discuss impacts on suicidality, emotional processes, and risk behaviors. Then we will actually apply evidence-based nursing interventions to support adolescents and their families. Overall, our central idea is that social media can both support while also challenging mental health. It depends on their use, the content, and the individual factors. Before discussing social media, it is so important to understand adolescents' development. This research that we focus on focuses on ages 6 to 19, a period of rapid cognitive, emotional, and social growth and development. During this stage, adolescents are forming identity, developing emotional regulation, and are still highly influenced by their peers. From a nursing perspective, this is a critical time for guidance, as adolescents are still developing coping skills, independence, and emotional awareness. These developmental factors provide foundation for understanding how social media can impact mental health. Social media is widespread and integrated into adolescents' daily lives. It serves as a primary space for communication and their self-expression. This creates both risks and benefits. Social media can provide connection, support, and opportunities for emotional expression, especially for adolescents who may already feel isolated to begin with and don't really have that sense of community. However, it can expose youth to cyberbullying, harmful content, and constant social comparison, all of which are linked to negative mental health outcomes. Importantly, these effects vary depending upon how social media is used and then the individual's specific vulnerability. From a clinical perspective, this highlights the importance of not making assumptions about social media use. Just simply asking how long a kid is online is not enough. We need to understand how they're engaging, what type of content they're even being exposed to, and then how it can affect them emotionally and psychologically. Sorry, my mouth is so dry, I apologize. This kind of assessment, like I was talking about, allows nurses to better identify both risk and protective factors so that we can provide a more individualized, effective support. In addition to development and usage patterns, social determinants of health shape adolescents' experience with social media. Factors like income, parental support, and community resources influence access, supervision, and exposure. For example, Pew Research in 2025 found differences in smartphone ownership based on income and race. And that highlights huge variation in digital access and independence. These differences reflect how technology is integrated into daily lives across different and diverse populations. Support systems such as family, school environments, after-school activities can all act as protective factors by helping adolescents navigate the online world in an appropriate way. From a nursing lens, this helps us understand why social media does not affect all adolescents equally. Some youth are more vulnerable to negative outcomes while others experience those protective benefits. It's definitely not a one-size-fits-all for all kids. These social determinants are especially important to consider when interpreting research because they both shape protective and risk factors. They influence how adolescents experience online digital environments. Without this context, it is so easy to oversimplify the relationship between social media and mental health. Instead, we need to recognize that a combination of individual, social, and environmental factors shape these outcomes. Keeping this in mind helps us guide how we assess adolescents, how we interpret the literature, and then how we can apply evidence-based interactions into our actual practice.
The extent of the impact of social media was brought to our attention by our agency contacts, the guidance counselors at Keister Elementary School. In a meeting with them, they stated that over the past 5 to 7 years, they noticed the following changes in students: increased distractibility and tiredness throughout the day, increased relational conflicts related to social media use outside of school, like private texts being shared in message groups and bullying. Along with that, there has also been an increase in self-esteem issues, as well as anxiety and depression related to students worrying about what others think about them. There has also been an increase in participation in negative viral trends, such as Chromebook destruction. Another trend that counselors have noticed but are not sure stems from social media is the ability for students to persevere through the academic process when it is hard. On a slightly broader scale, in Virginia, a law became effective January 1st, 2026, that would require all social media companies to verify people's ages. If a person is younger than 16, they would be limited to 1 hour of social media use per platform, but parents or guardians could increase or decrease this time limit. This law is currently being appealed and it is not in effect. But you may be left to wonder, what can we as nurses do about the impact of social media? Well, one intervention is advocacy and influencing policy related to social media and the research of it. According to Klein et al., adolescents described learning suicidal behavior through social media. So one change that we could petition for is for social media companies to alter their algorithms so that suicide-related content is not sensationalized or shown, and that a suicide hotline number is attached to suicide-related content. Additionally, a lot of social media research is correlational rather than causational, and researchers are not able to assess social media's impact on development because they do not have access to social media companies' data. Along with that, social media companies will sometimes sue researchers who do studies on them, which can scare people away from doing more research on social media, as we could imagine. So, nurses can advocate that legislation is passed that gives researchers access to data and protections against social media companies, as well as requires algorithm change. Very good. Another important intervention is providing education. Social media is becoming an ever-present part of life, It is important that nurses provide education that increases social media literacy so that adolescents are able to recognize and report abusive behaviors and know how to navigate social media more safely. This education could be provided in school or via programs where a nurse partners with the family, particularly parents, as studies have shown. Programs like these result in decreased behavioral and cognitive problems in children, as well as increased parental confidence. Parents report that the greatest gap in navigating social media use in their households is the lack of comprehensible, trusted information about social media. Besides partnering with families, nurses could address this need by working with their organizations to create educational pamphlets or a website that parents can be directed to if they have questions. Research shows that adolescents who face fewer negative impacts from social media are significantly more likely to come from families with regular communication between parents and children about their social media use, and that have established rules for technology use, and where parents model healthy boundaries with how to engage online. Another important intervention is early detection. Whether social media's impact on adolescents is positive or negative often depends on the adolescent's underlying characteristics, like their social and emotional impairment and risky or impulsive internet use, and whether the adolescent is there to find support for their health, mental health, and if not, if that need is met or not. If not, adolescents are more at risk for problematic use of social media, which includes things like discussing self-harm or comparing themselves to others negatively. To better understand this finding, we're going to use Aguilera's crisis theory. A crisis is a stressful event in which a person's usual way of coping is not effective. In this case, adolescents go to social media to find support, but do not, and leave continuing to feel distressed. There are three factors in a crisis that must be present for a person to reach a state of equilibrium, those being the following: a realistic perception of the event, adequate situational support, adequate coping mechanisms. As nurses, we can help adolescents build these three factors so they are less likely to be in crisis. One way to do this is to establish an early detection and monitoring program for mental health conditions in schools and primary care settings, as early intervention allows nurses to build better relationships with adolescents and their support systems, and to find ways to provide access to mental health care for youth and their families. Additionally, it is important that nurses combat stigma around mental health so that adolescents are more willing to step forward and have these conversations. This can be done by using non-judgmental or negatively weighted language and encouraging others not to either, and embodying the Sacred Covenant principles. The Sacred Covenant is a model of nursing that is used at EMU. It is a Christian-based nurse-patient partnership model that acknowledges that it is a privilege and spiritual calling to care for the vulnerable. There are 9 approaches that a nurse could use when interacting with a patient in order to provide the best care. The 9 approaches being advocacy, agape love, empowerment, grace, justice, presence, partnership, and reconciliation and service. In this case, presence, partnership, advocacy, and agape love seem the most pertinent in providing care to adolescents with mental health concerns. First, nurses should be in the moment with an adolescent when they are being vulnerable and show agape love, which is unconditional and unjudgmental, to validate that vulnerability. Then they should work with an adolescent on ways to improve mental health and social media use, as well as to advocate for them in getting the help they need. And lastly, nurses should reflect on how they care for patients who experience emotional and mental distress, whether that care is inequitable, and what is the impact of the care we provide, because stigma related to mental health and social media are difficult to change if we are not aware of which ones we hold. Okay, next, to better understand what adolescents go through, we have a small, on social media nowadays, we have a small activity. One brief note before we begin, trigger warning, some slips have difficult content on them, but the content is based on real stories we've heard or read about in our research, and you all know yourselves best, so please do what you need to take care of yourself. So if you feel a need, you are more than welcome to step out for a moment. If you will notice on the back of the chairs, or maybe in front, that there are envelopes. If you could partner with your neighbor and grab one. If you don't have one near you, there's some closer up to the front. Don't open the envelopes yet. Yes.
If you guys are in the back row, there should be envelopes taped to like the base of your chair. Sorry.
Okay. Does everyone have an envelope? Yes? Okay. Okay, in your envelope, there's a gray slip. If you could pull that out, that would be good. Oh, make sure you don't read the white slips yet. No. Just pull out the gray one.
Let me go ahead and explain.
Okay. So on the gray slip is going to be your background and your base set of points. I think it should be either +2 or -2. When we cue you as a group, draw one white slip from the envelope and discuss the scenario. When we cue you again, you move on to the next one, and you add and subtract points based off what points are on the slip. And afterwards, we will reconvene and discuss our takeaways for the activity. So go ahead and read the first white slip scenario and discuss with your partner. Okay. Okay. I think it. I didn't even notice that. You can go ahead and read the second slip and discuss. Move on.
You can just be like, assuming you guys have read all your slips.
Huh? All right. Is it been 30 seconds? You can go ahead and read the third slip.
Conversation's good.
Yeah. That was people wake people up.
Maybe ask if everyone's like read all their slips. Maybe ask if everyone's read.
We still have to go to the fourth one. And then go ahead and move on to your last slip or finish up in the next 30 seconds. And then for the next minute. Okay, if for the next minute you could discuss with groups near you and compare scenarios in your experience on social media via your slips. One gray slip, and then you go through all the white slips.
Yeah, that's what I was like. I think people are confused.
Okay.
Like, that's why I was like, I think someone needs to enunciate it a bit better.
Oh well. Whatever you want. Yeah, it's all right. I guess that's fine. Alrighty. Are you all done? Very good. Okay. What are some things that stood out to you all? What are some things that stood out to you all? Was your experiences largely positive, negative, or? It's one thing at least, I guess our research is mental health related largely, but one thing we noticed is that your algorithm is different per person a lot of the time, and some people, there's not a lot of in between. It's like all negative, all positive, and sometimes the negative outweighs the positive nowadays. So.
But what score did you get? Yeah. It definitely shows how difficult social media can be these days, especially. So thanks for being a realistic example, I guess. Did anyone have any different? Yes.
Ours was mostly positive.
Okay.
But then the one that we had a huge impact that was negative. So I just wondered if like that was intentional or if that was for our group.
Honestly, these are all random because social media, we obviously can't control what we see most of the time, right? So we honestly just jumbled them up and started organizing. And I'm glad that it showed a realistic portrayal because, yeah, I mean, you could have everything going for you and then one bad thing happens and it feels like the whole world dropped, right?
Was it your background that was negative, or?
No, our background was positive and everything was positive until we got to one and then it was like a -3.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry about that. Holly.
I would just say that in reading, particularly one of my exposures, even though I know that anything and everything is filmed and is on social media, I know that in my head, just reading it, like I felt it in my chest. And so it really just penetrated more deeply, just a notch deeper, the gravity of these exposures for children and adolescents.
Definitely. And these are things that are all real scenarios, like Christina said, like they all came up in our research, or things like we have even experienced, like here or there. So it's definitely insane how real some of these are. And I think, I'm not a parent, but if I were, it would be a little jarring, I think, to understand, just because, you know, kids are kids. So it's really hard, I think, from an outsider's perspective.
So this activity was especially meaningful because it highlighted the wide range of scores and personal experiences across groups. It really demonstrates that social media is not a one-size-fits-all experience. It impacts varies greatly from person to person. At the same time, it reinforces an important takeaway from our discussion so far, that social media carries both meaningful benefits and significant risks for adolescents. With that in mind, we can now shift our focus towards how to address these impacts through evidence-based solutions. Now that we've discussed how social media impacts adolescents' mental health, I'm going to focus on evidence-based solutions, followed by gaps in current research and a potential research proposal for moving forward. First, it is important to recognize that solutions need to address both the risks and benefits of social media while also supporting adolescents in developing healthy coping skills. One of the most supported interventions in the literature is the use of school-based mental health education programs. These programs focus on emotional regulation, coping strategies, and digital literacy. Research suggests that school-based interventions can significantly improve emotional resilience and reduce symptoms of anxiety and depression in adolescents. Since schools are a primary environment for youth, these programs provide an accessible and consistent way to promote mental health. Another key solution is early identification and screening at-risk adolescents, which Christina said earlier, especially in healthcare and school settings. Studies emphasize that incorporating questions about social media use into routine mental health assessments can improve early detection of depression, anxiety, and suicidal ideation. Nurses play a critical role here by assessing not just how often adolescents use social media, but the quality of their online interactions, which has been shown to be more predictive of mental health outcomes. In addition, mindfulness-based interventions, also known as MBIs, have become a really effective way to help adolescents handle the stress that can come from social media. MBIs teach adolescents to observe their thoughts and emotions without judgment, which helps reduce stress and emotional reactivity. all of which can be triggered by negative online interactions. Evidence shows that mindfulness exercises can significantly decrease anxiety and depression and help adolescents manage their emotions better. Schools and community programs that include things like guided meditation, breathing exercises, and mindfulness activities have shown to boost resilience and overall well-being in young people. Another evidence-based strategy is the implementation of anti-cyberbullying programs. Cyberbullying has been strongly associated with increased suicidal ideation and emotional distress. Prevention programs that promote empathy, digital responsibility, and peer support have been shown to reduce bullying behaviors and improve the overall school climate. We also see strong evidence supporting the role of positive online communities and peer support. Research indicates that adolescents who engage in supportive and affirming online interactions experience protective mental health benefits, including reduced feelings of isolation and improved emotional well-being. Encouraging adolescents to seek out positive spaces online can help balance some of the risks associated with social media. Family involvement is another critical component. Open communication between parents and adolescents, along with setting healthy boundaries across screen time and content exposure, has been associated with better mental health outcomes. Importantly, research suggests that monitoring should be supportive rather than controlling, as overly restrictive approaches may decrease trust and increase secretive behavior. Finally, promoting emotional intelligence is a key protective strategy. Adolescents with higher emotional intelligence are better able to regulate their responses to negative online experiences. Studies show that emotional intelligence can buffer the relationship between social media, stress, anxiety, and depression. Now transitioning into the gaps that we saw in our research, there are several important limitations that we need to consider. One major gap is that most of our current research is observational, which means we can identify associations but not direct causation. For example, while studies show a link between social media use and depression, we cannot definitively say that social media causes depression. Another key issue is the rapid evolution of social media platforms. Trends, features, and algorithms change so quickly that research can become outdated within a short period of time. That makes it really difficult to develop long-term evidence-based guidelines that remain relevant. There is also a lack of research focusing on diverse populations, including differences in culture, socioeconomic status, and access to technology. This is especially important in communities like Harrisonburg, where there is a very diverse and multilingual population. Without inclusive research, interventions may not be effective for all groups. Additionally, there are ongoing ethical challenges, particularly among monitoring versus privacy. While monitoring adolescents' online activity may help prevent harm, it also raises concerns about autonomy and trust. More research is needed to determine the most ethical and effective approaches. Alongside this, self-report bias is a limitation in many studies. A large portion of research relies on adolescents reporting their own social media use and mental health symptoms. This can lead to inaccurate data due to underreporting, overreporting, or recall bias, which ultimately limits the reliability of findings on true social media behavior and mental health outcomes. Lastly, there is limited evidence evaluating the long-term effectiveness of school-based and community interventions. While many programs show short-term benefits, we need more longitudinal studies to understand their sustained impact over time. Based on these gaps, a potential research proposal could focus on evaluating a school-based intervention that integrates emotional intelligence training with digital literacy education. For example, a study can be conducted in a local school involving students in upper elementary or middle school grades. The intervention would include lessons on emotional regulation, recognizing harmful online content, and building positive digital habits. The study could measure students before and after the program to see changes in anxiety, emotional intelligence, and stress related to social media. Data could be collected using trusted screening tools and student surveys. This research would aim to answer the question, can teaching emotional intelligence along with digital literacy help reduce negative mental health effects of social media in adolescents? This type of study would be very valuable because it addresses multiple gaps, including the need for evidence-based interventions, long-term effectiveness, and relevance to diverse populations. In summary, while social media presents real risks to adolescent mental health, there are several evidence-based strategies that can help reduce these effects. At the same time, ongoing research is needed to address current limitations and ensure that interventions remain effective in an ever-changing digital world. Here are all of our references. Okay. Are there any questions?
Again, I have a microphone for questions, and I'll start out. I'm wondering, I might have missed it if you said it. I've always been under the impression that there's some gender differences in terms of higher risk, that adolescent girls tend to be at higher risk for negative mental health impacts from social media. I'm curious if you found any verification. Is that true? Is that changing? Was that never true? Is that just a rumor?
I think females are more at risk for things like anxiety and depression. That came up in one research article I read, but we didn't run into too much, at least I didn't.
I will say, I talked about a gap in current research about diverse populations. A lot of my research was about younger white females. That's why I was trying to find a lot more diverse populations, and it was very, very hard to find, especially just younger males.
So I've used that as the foundation for our family's very strict cell phone rules related to my girls. So I'm just going to take that as a yes, I'm right, and we need to stick with it. What other questions do you have?
I would love to hear a little bit more about your interactions at Keister and what that experience was like.
So for Keister, we all did different things. I primarily made a teaching plan for all different grades revolving around emotional intelligence, how the brain works, and then when you're having these strong emotions, how to cope with them, because I wanted these kids to learn better coping skills at an early age. So I made us 3 separate slide sets and then 3 separate study plans, or teaching plans from kindergarten through 2nd grade, 3rd and 4th graders, and then primarily focused for 5th graders on social media because they're moving and transitioning to middle school and eventually high school. But yeah, so when we were talking with Keister, a lot of the counselors stated that even these 3rd and 4th graders have phones and they all have social media, and they're noticing these observational studies that these kids aren't getting enough sleep, they're not doing well on their academics, they'd rather be on their phones, and just a lot of observational data.
And then I carved a brain out of foam, and I put the different parts of the lobes, different lobes on there. I can actually show you a picture later if you want to see it. Just to have along, because I thought it'd be cool for kids to have a 3D visual that they can actually handle when they're learning about the brain. And I made a parts of the brain poster to put up in the guidance counselor and to put in Emily's toolkit.
Mm-hmm. And then I guess I made a toolkit for Keister. It included a bunch of study plans, posters, worksheets, everything related to emotional regulation, emotional awareness, how sleep affects your bodies, especially for the younger kids. So K through 2nd was what even are emotions? Because, I didn't have a lot of pediatric background coming into this, so I did not know what children know. They know a lot more than I thought, but yeah, so it's just crazy. I feel like we did a lot of work, and we got to attend counseling classes that they do with their kiddos there. It's 30 minutes or so, and so that was really interesting to actually see the kids, how they interacted with the counselor. Attention spans are not super long, but the counselors also said that they have noticed a decline in that because of social media, technology as a whole. So that was super interesting to find out as well.
My question is about screening tools, which you mentioned several times. I was wondering well, you mentioned the importance of screening for the risk and impact of social media. Did you come across any particular tools, like akin to the PHQ-2 or PHQ-9, or specific questions that can be asked, keeping in mind that just duration of technology or social media use is not a good indicator?
So you had screening tools on your slide. What did you find?
So for the screening tools, majority of the research was just asking questions while they're going through their yearly doctor's visits and just asking the questions, but that ultimately is hard because of what I stated earlier about the gaps in research, is that recall bias, and just a lot of times kids are scared of the doctor, so just being completely honest up front, especially when you're parent there, about your social media use and your phone use. So I think definitely the screening tools need to be reevaluated and just overall improved, because like I said earlier, just not being able to have these longitudinal studies, and also just it's really unfortunate, but yeah, the best thing that I've come across, I don't know about you guys, but the best thing I've come across is just adding, just asking these children questions at their doctor's appointment, just how much social media, how much screen time they use and stuff like that, but overall that might not be as efficient.
And I have come across the PHQ-2 for certain demographics, but I think that gets a little bit more difficult when we're talking about youths, because the wording is very much geared towards teenagers and adults. So if you ask a 9-year-old, over the past 2 weeks, have you felt depressed and stuff? It's a lot more difficult to actually get accurate studies that we would use for a literature review in our research as well.
What other questions? I'm going to prioritize not level 3s. I know, I'm coming to you, but all right, we'll go do one, because you guys you're just right there, it's great.
I was wondering, because I've seen on social media, so I don't know how accurate it is, but people encouraging or attempting to sue social media platforms for emotional damages. And so, because you talked about how research is mostly observational, so it's more of association and not causation, how realistic or unrealistic that is?
Yeah, that is such a good question. Christina talked about it a bit earlier with people suing researchers that want to investigate social media a bit more. But we didn't specifically look at social media being sued due to emotional damages and trauma. I do understand why people would want to do that, but that was not the purpose of this presentation, so I unfortunately didn't get a chance to look into it. But that would be super fascinating, because I feel there's so many different opinions in that. Thank you.
This is more simple, but is there something you wish you would have done different in your research or in this whole presentation
I think it's
process?
just, I can only speak for myself. I think that it was very difficult to research and find accurate research that we would use for a specific educational purpose, just because things are so new. Ever since I was in elementary or middle school, things have changed so much, and it makes me feel so old to say that, but things are just so different, and we learned a lot while doing this. But I do wish there was more numbers and research out there that we could present to you guys, because I know we presented a lot, but I think in 20 years we'll find out so much more that will be beneficial as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. So I'm really curious. I know there's a stereotype now with parenting and saying if certain kids are iPad kids are not growing up. So I was curious, since you guys are working with elementary schoolers, that's the type of age where parents kind of grow up their iPad kids and they give them an iPad, especially if they have a younger sibling that they have to deal with. So I'm really curious if you guys ran into any of that, or if the counselors that you worked with at Keister, anywhere in your research, said anything about the parents and how they have the effect on allowing their children to use social media and just kind of giving them a screen to do whatever, just to keep them distracted and kind of intertwined, and to leave them alone while they're cooking dinner, whatever it may be.
Yeah, that's a really good question.
Yeah, so when we were at Keister, I think the priority was more on the children, so we never really came across a conversation about the parents, but I think that is a really good question. But yeah, we primarily just wanted to focus on the children rather than the parents giving them this access to the technology. They already have the access, so now we need to just help teach them these like healthy coping skill and emotional intelligence, and then just what to do with the technology.
One more addition to that. I do think that counselors have kind of leaned in to kids with like, I guess kids having shorter attention spans. Like the presentations they have are very interactive, and they ask the kids lots of questions. And I did notice some kids were were allowed to have tablets, but I think that those were like kids with needs, and it's more like to help them stay calm and give them, those sorts of resources.
I was just wondering if you all were able to find any research that highlights like differences between cultures with widespread access to social media versus cultures who don't have access.
I did find one study that I talked about, Pew Research 2025. There was not super large gaps, but definite gaps between race and like ethnicities, which was super interesting. So Black and Hispanic parents were more likely to get their kids cell phone access, and those are also the people that had lower income compared to like white families who are more wealthy, which I found super interesting because in my head I thought it would be flipped. I don't know reasons why. I can speculate, but I don't know details. That was like one of the big ones I came across in my research. I don't know if you guys have anything to add, but that was the primarily one that we looked at. But that would be interesting to look at different cultures because different cultures also have different beliefs. So that's a really good point.
I'll just add one more thing as the parent of two kids that are in this age group. So I was just at a rising 9th grader parent breakfast. So my oldest daughter is going to start high school at Eastern Mennonite School next year. And they were announcing a shift. So their high school policy used to be cell phones had to be away during instructional time. So they'd have like pockets and stuff in classrooms. But between classes or over lunch, high school kids were allowed to have their cell phones out. Middle school is not. Apparently, state of Virginia, starting January 1st for public schools, started a new policy that's like away for the day. So in public schools, high schools, throughout the state, kids are not allowed to have their cell phones like visible on them at all throughout, from the start of school to the end. And that's what they're proposing doing down in EMS for middle school, or for high school, excuse me. And I was like, first of all, super supportive, but shocked at the breakfast, the number of parents that were like making a fuss about this. Feeling like their kids needed it for social regulation, needed it for a time to check out. It was really interesting to me, and it emphasized like the intense pressures that our educators are under when they try to put in place sort of regulatory processes that are evidence-based. It was interesting, I have a friend who teaches in that high school, and she said the day after they made the announcement, the high schoolers, like she couldn't teach class because there were like tears and drama and what about, what if my parent dies and I won't know, like catastrophizing. And it was really interesting to sort of see very legitimate like stress they felt with even anticipating being separated from their phones for in a new way that they hadn't been experiencing. And it just made me think a little bit about like addictive behavior and the sort of major hump or work we have to do to make changes, because people get really used, both parents and their kids get really used to what they've been doing and don't like that kind of change. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
No, that's such a good point. One of the slips that we put in some of the envelopes said like, you're away from your phone and then you have a lot of anxiety because you can't check your notifications. And that's a very real situation for some kids. My sister just started high school, so they're not allowed to have their phones. We live in Northern Virginia, and she feels that every day. She's like, what if I can't talk to my mom? What if something happens? Like, I can't look at Instagram. I'm like, it'll be okay. I know it's like a big change, but it also hasn't been around forever. You're just having to change what you have thought as normal.
And that's a theme that also came up in some qualitative studies we found. Like adolescents using social media to cope, and then when that's gone, like they're dysregulated. And that's why we think it's important to build other coping mechanisms.
All right. Any more final pressing questions?
This is not a question, but what you were saying earlier about the research with like minority groups tended to give their kids phones and whatnot. So like, just from experience, I haven't done my own research either, but
That's okay.
I think
Feel
with
free.
like with a lot of minority groups, or if you want an example like an immigrant family that just moved here, like a lot of times there's a lot of responsibility at a younger age. So that could be like, if we want to speculate, that could be a reason why they have phones early on, especially if it's an older sibling. There's probably a higher chance with like a lot of minority groups, the older siblings are going to be like taking care of them, even like in elementary school starting out. So yeah, it's not uncommon to see a 4th grader with a phone because he's going to be walking home, or she with their siblings. And then like just the domino effect of like early on, since the parents trust them enough, they'll probably be like, okay, you might need a device because we need to contact you. They're probably working, so some of these kids might be home by themselves.
That's such a good
Like,
point. So
yeah.
I said I didn't want to speculate because this is obviously an evidence-based presentation, but definitely if I could speculate, I did wonder maybe that's because Hispanic mom, just speculating, has 3 jobs and can't be home to see if like Susie ate dinner. So that's kind of where my thought process was, but I'm glad that like you were thinking the same thing, because that's kind of what I was speculating as well.
Awesome. Sorry, I lost track of time. We're done. Let's give them a big round
Thank
of
you
applause. All right, don't forget to sign out. Don't forget to see Laura at the back for Engage Points. EMU nursing presentations start back here at 1 p.m. Lots of cool stuff to check out at ACE Festival. So we'll see you then.